Hey everybody, this is Mr. Munson, and we're in Unit 1 doing basic geometry right now. This section that we're looking at is 1.4, midpoint formula, and finding a midpoint of a segment. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. All right, let's make sure we're setting up our notebook correctly. At some point just above where you're starting your notes here, you should have a summary from 1.3 or the 1.213 video, whatever, and draw a dark line, then state 1.4 midpoint, draw another line that creates the boundary, if you will. Let's put the date in there, whatever your date is, so that you can find it, and let's get started. All right, suppose I gave you two test scores, a 90 and a 100, and I asked you to find the average. See if you can remember how to do that. How would you average those test scores? Put me on pause. Let's come back and check in just a second. Okay, hopefully you got that. You just simply add the two together and divide by 2, and that gives you a 95. Now this is what I know. In between those two test scores, a 90 and a 100, whenever I average it, the average, the one in the middle, exactly happens. It ends up in the middle, right? It's equal distance from both sides. That's what it means to be the average. Okay? Keep that in mind as we move forward. All right, so looking over on the left hand here, or right hand side. So suppose I have 2 points, A and B. It could be this 90 and this 100, it doesn't matter. Notice at top of the line I have a capital A and a capital B. That's because those are points, and you always use capital letters for that. Now when we're talking about a variable or whatever, we always use lowercase, letters like X and Y are always in the lowercase form. Here I'm just going to use A and B because those are our point names. Well, I'm sure it's not too much of a fuss to tell you to find that M, that middle point. I'd simply take A plus B and divide it by 2. Now, a little bit more interesting case would be this in the coordinate plane, given some points A and B and the line that goes in between, or the segment that's between them. Maybe I want to find the coordinates of the midpoint. That would be an X value and a Y value for that M. So let's take a look at that. Now let's just give the A and the B some generic numbers like X1, Y1, and X2 and Y2. They represent some number. And so with all that said, I hope it's not a big stretch for you to understand why I would call the midpoint XM and YM. Okay? So let's look at how to calculate the midpoint. And again, just because I'm working with very limited space, I'm going to be moving my stuff around. But this gives me a lot more room to work underneath it and continue on. Wherever it is in your paper, you go ahead and continue on from there. Okay, let's jump over to our vocabulary sheet, fill some stuff in, kind of get going. We should have already had Pythagorean theorem in there. So let's go ahead and continue on. That you might have gotten that from class or a previous video. All right, so this next word that we're looking at is midpoint. So the midpoint, and again, remember to write that over on the back side of that sheet of paper over on the right-hand side. So the midpoint of a line segment is the point that is equal distance, same distance from both end points. Okay? As you can see from the picture here, M is in the midpoint, and that I know that's the midpoint because it's marked congruent. And so that puts M right in the middle of it. Given 2 points, XY, or X1 and Y1 and X2 and Y2, then the midpoint formula finds the midpoint. Its coordinates being, as we've talked before, XM, YM. The little M designates that these are the X and the Y values of the midpoint. Okay? All right, very good. So there's your midpoint formula. Make sure you keep that handy. And the last one that we have on this page is the segment bisector. And as you can tell by the picture, a segment bisector is a line, a segment, or a ray, or it could even be a plane, a flat glass surface that intersects a segment, thing that has limited, it has endpoints. It intersects it at its midpoint. Okay? So as you can see, L bisects KJ. Again, I'll point out that L represents the name of that line, and it's a lowercase cursive letter. Okay, so back to our notes. We just saw the midpoint formula. Okay, so the midpoint, which is designated as XM, YM, can be found by these two separate equations. One dealing with the X components, and the other one dealing with the Y components. Let's look at an example. Okay, given 2 endpoints, E being one of them, F being the other, find the midpoint. So let's just take those numbers and plug it in the formula. Now this is from this point until the end of this year. Anytime that you're dealing with a formula or whatever where you're plugging stuff in, you always write the formula with no numbers in it. So many students say, I can never remember formulas. And the reason is because every time you write the formula, you're starting off with writing it with numbers in it. So it's never the same formula in any given problem. Every time it's got 2's in it and 3's in it and stuff like that. So if you really sincerely are walking with me and you're wanting to, for the first time in your entire math career, become somebody that can memorize formulas, the absolute key is to write the formula with no numbers in it. Just simply write it, then write it again with the new numbers in it. When you start doing that, you'll see that you'll start memorizing your formulas. That's exactly what I do. Watch. So I write the formula. You know how it has that x2 and x1? This is what it means. If in the very first point or whatever, I stick it in that spot, the 7x goes there, then I always have to, in the other formula, lead off with that same 5. Okay, its partner. So if I start with 7 in that spot, now I could do the same thing with 2 and the -4, that's F. If I put 2 in the very first spot on the X coordinate stuff, then I have to put -4 in the first spot in the Y stuff. It's that simple. Don't get confused by the little 2 and the little 1. So you write the formula with nothing in it. Every time you do this problem, every time you do a midpoint formula problem, you write it out, okay? Takes you 35 seconds and helps you memorize it. There's the first side. Now let's work on the y. And there I've calculated what xm and ym is, but you'll never give it to me in that form. Remember, this is a point, so we'll always write it as a point. All right, and there you have it. Can you guess the one thing I've forgotten to do? Circle my answer. Okay, always circle the answer. It makes the reader be able to find it, and you get full credit. All right, let's move on. All right, it's time for you to try it. Go ahead and take a look at that. Write it down on your paper, in your notes. Go ahead and do the problem. Put it on pause and come back and check to see if you did it right. All right, welcome back. Does it surprise you at all that I wrote down the formula? That's what I told you to do. So if you did not do that, I want you to put me on pause again and just go back to the beginning of this problem that you started working and write the formula in. Then come back and check your work. All right, there you have it. Perfect. So that's pretty much it. Hopefully you got that right answer and you understand it. If not, go ahead and rewind it back and make sure you follow the directions and do it. Okay, so let's go ahead and continue on to another idea. All right, in this next section, we're going to find an endpoint of a segment given the midpoint and the other endpoint. You know, in the last section, we gave 2 endpoints to find the midpoint. Now we're going to go find the endpoint. But before we do that, let's review on something. All right, given an equation like this to solve for x, a couple of different ways to do it. One is to multiply both sides by 3, and then the 3's cancel. I want you to know that's a perfectly good method. I like the next method better. The x minus 4 and a 3 is a fraction. 13 can be a fraction, 13 over 1. And if you remember, if you have a fraction equals a fraction, you solve that by cross multiplying, right? And the rest of that steps are just trivial. But you flatten it out. You turn fraction into a fraction equals fraction into an equation that's all flat. I love that. So that's how I typically solve these kind of problems. So I cross multiply, and you know, x minus 4 times 1 is x minus 4, but then 3 times 30, and so on. I'm going to assume that you know how to do that from this point on. If you need to write that down, put me on pause. It's getting ready to erase. Okay, so we're given a midpoint, -2, 1. We're given a C, which is an endpoint. Now we're looking for the other D, the other endpoint. Okay, so we're going to use the midpoint formula. Of course, I wrote it before I put any numbers in it. Now it's just a matter of taking those components and plug them into the right place. Let's remember something. I can designate the midpoint as xm, ym. C can be either x1, y1, or x2, y2, it doesn't matter, and I'll just designate the other one. Now I take each piece and put them in their proper place. Okay, so I color-coded everything where it's going, okay? So maybe put it on pause and analyze this. I took the equation, wrote it, just filled in the information. Now it's just manipulating the numbers, doing regular math. as I just showed before, I'm going to take that -2, turn it into a -2 over 1. I see that as a fraction equals fraction, cross multiply. That's how I'm going to do these kind of problems. So I got x1 to equal 1. You can tell by the little negative, or the little ones at the bottom, that we're talking about an endpoint. This is not the answer. We'll bring this together. We'll call this 1, comma, -5, and that represents the point D. What did I forget? Circle. All right, it's time for you to try it. All right, here you go. Go ahead and put me on pause, work out, find out what the endpoint C would be. All right, and there you have it. If you need to, put me on pause, especially if you got a different answer, and see what it is, where you went wrong, or if you have a question, okay? All right, let's move on. All right, so this is another try it problem. It's going back to do distance formula stuff, so I want you to see how you think you understand the distance formula. Take a look at this problem in my work and see if you can decide where my mistake is. Where did I make my mistake, and find the distance between Q and R. Put me on pause, then come back and see if you have the correct understanding. Okay, the fact that there's an error is telling you that this is an incorrect answer, so something's gone wrong. The thing that probably would set it apart as being wrong, the reason it's the original green line there, it's the setup, 1 minus 5. That probably wouldn't have happened if I would have simply wrote the equation first with no numbers in it. That would remind me to take the x's from each of the points and the y's from each of the points and put them in the correct place. A lot of times that plus sign in the middle is left off because people just simply start throwing numbers in and they forget the plus sign. But if you start writing the formulas without any numbers in it, you'll start memorizing, getting it right. I'm hoping that you're like me. I don't like doing more work than I have to, but nothing frustrates me more than doing work that doesn't create a correct answer. That is a bigger waste of time. Writing the formulas first will prevent you from doing that. All right, here's another try it problem I want to see if you can do. So it's different. So I want you to put me on pause and think through this, what it really is asking in the sense of information you already know how to do. Okay, so we have a circle. We have a point in the middle of that diameter EF. The coordinates given for E and F, and I'm asking you, what's the coordinates of P? See if you can do this one. Come back and check it. If you're not sure what to do, think about it, and then come back and just get a hint from me, and then start doing the work. Well, I know that P is the center of a circle. It's also the center of every diameter. The center is the midpoint of the diameter. In other words, I'm asking you to use the midpoint formula to find P. If you've done that and you're on your way, fantastic. You've really thought through a difficult problem, something we're going to do in Chapter 2, so you're way ahead of the ball. If not, no problem. Go ahead and write down the equation, start doing the work, come back and check your answer with me. All right. There you have it. P is equal to 9, 5. Fantastic. All right, I'm drawing a line like that. That's probably giving you a hint where we're at. Write the word summary. I want you to go back and summarize all the pieces that you learned today, okay, in this video. And then let's get on to our homework problems. All right, so here's your 4 problems that I need you to do to show that you've understood and mastered. And actually, the 4th problem is not really a problem. It's more of a bonus. And you're going to do it on this paper. A lot of times the bonuses are on separate pieces of paper. This one's on the piece of paper. If you end up doing this one on the back side of your paper, then I need you to write on the front, number 4, bonus, see the back side. And then I'll look. If it's not there, I won't go looking for it. Okay? Now I'm going to scroll through the problems so you can see them a little bit closer. Put it on pause so you can see it. I'm going to scroll it along. There you have it. All right, have a good one. We'll see you next class.